Welcome everyone. We'll just give it a couple of moments for people to start coming in. Once we get settled, we'll go ahead and get started. If you would like in the chat, go ahead and share your name and what institution you're with and your title and anything interesting that you'd like to share with everyone. Put that in chat while we're waiting for everybody to filter in. And I'll share this a couple of times. I'm going to go ahead and share a Padlet link with everyone that we will get to in just a moment. Those of you that are here, I will give you a warning. I was just given that Holly is in a tornado watch right now, or tornado warning in Iowa. So if she has to, you put that in the chat too.
I added it in the chat.
If she has to duck out all of a sudden, or we see the computer go flying, we'll know what's going on.
If you hear sirens, don't worry. I'll just get underneath my desk and finish up the webinar.
All right, I'm going to share that link one more time just in case anybody needs it, and I'll try to remember to do it again here in a little bit. If you have any questions as the webinar is being presented, please, if you have questions, go into the chat. We also have a Padlet. That was the link that I was sharing. You can go in there to ask questions, share information, share ideas with other people on the webinar or people who may be watching the webinar later on from the recording. And we will also try to get to some of those questions as well. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. We might have more people come through here in just a little bit, and that's fine. But first, I'd like to welcome and thank our two presenters today. We have from ICCOC, which, you know what, Holly, it's at Northwest Iowa. Oh, I got it right. Northwest Iowa Community College, a part of the ICCOC, and a graphic design instructor and communications instructor. Holly, no, not communications.
I'll explain it.
Okay. But we have Holly DeGrote with us, and then we also have from the University of Michigan a lecturer in the it's Brian Miller from University of Michigan. The program, I'm trying to remember the name of the program. Program in computing. I'm lost.
computing for the arts and sciences.
Yes. Okay. There we go.
I always mix it around too, whether it's program for computing in the arts and sciences or program in computing for the arts. It took me a long time to get that straight. So.
Yeah. Okay. So as you can see and hear, this is graphic design, computing for the arts. So we call this a digital arts webinar. And both Holly and Brian have some similar structure to how they present, a digital art landscape. And so very different, but very similar in style. So we wanted to bring both of them in to share with all of you about what they're doing and how they're doing it. Again, I want to say, make sure that you are in the Padlet. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. If you can go into the Padlet and just make sure, I'm going to share that link one more time. If you go into the Padlet, if you put an idea down, just want to let you know we're going to be drawing some names after the webinar. So you might get a free Starbucks gift card from me after the webinar. So just a little enticement there to go in here and participate. But if you have any ideas or questions about discussion ideas, assignment ideas, Maybe you have some links that you want to share. I've already shared in the Padlet Brian's link to their program that he'll be speaking on in a little bit. Or if you are a current user of Harmonize and maybe you're listening to the webinar and you're thinking, man, I would love to have that feature as part of Harmonize. We really do listen to our clients. And so we have just released last week a brand new set of features that came out, including screen share and video length controls. And we are coming out in the summer with a brand new release. I can't speak too much on it. We don't have anything to show you yet, but it is going to be AI coaching off of the rubric. So we'll probably have a webinar coming up on that pretty soon. With all that said, let's get into the webinar. So again, thank you, Holly and Brian, for joining us. And let's just start out. Can you tell us a little bit more about the programs that you run and what it is you're teaching? Holly, let's start with you.
So as David introduced, I am Director of Online Learning at Northwest Iowa Community College. We work with 6 colleges in Iowa as part of the online consortium. So we've all decided that we are better together, and we deliver all of our online programs and classes that way. So under a grant that I started under, it was decided that we were going to add a couple of programs to our catalog and to our offerings that would be online only, and thought graphic design was a good fit. So when I heard about that, I thought, I've got that experience in art and graphic design, so I stepped up. But then came the challenge of how do I teach graphic design, which is usually a hands-on program? How do I teach it fully online? So I'm always interested in different tools, different strategies, different techniques that I can do to create and foster that connection between students. And so that's kind of what brings me to the webinar today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And Brian, you want to give us a little background on yourself and what you're doing there at Michigan?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as David said, I teach at University of Michigan in a program called Computing for the Arts and Sciences. It's located within the Liberal Arts College at Michigan, and that's really the kind of goal of the program is to provide kind of computing experience, computing education for students in the Liberal Arts College, without, for example, having to go do a computer science major to get some, computing and programming experience. And so our classes tend to have some kind of thematic focus that's kind of relevant for students in the arts or in the humanities. There's also kind of a natural sciences branch of the program too, which I'm a little bit less involved in. But so the classes will cover things like intro to programming in the context of sort of critical computing, the impact of computing on society, that sort of thing. Or the class that I'm here to talk about today that I use Harmonize in, a class called Computing for Creative Expression. I'm also working on developing a class that's more kind of specifically music focused too. So trying to kind of bring computing to students with topics that will be kind of interest to them for their, with respect to their specific majors in the liberal arts college.
Now, Brian, Holly was saying how the program she developed completely asynchronous. Holly, yeah, asynchronous online. Are you online only? Are you in class, hybrid model? What's going on there with that?
Yeah, my classes so far are all in person. And so, yeah, it's a kind of a different landscape. One of the things that, one of the kind of gaps that Harmonize helps to fill is that in the kind of arts-based classes, we like the class to kind of work as if it were a sort of art studio where students are doing a lot of kind of hands-on work and experimenting and making things and then kind of collaborating, sharing, commenting on each other's work. But as the classes kind of get bigger, now like at the moment, I'm teaching classes of 50 students in a section for this. It's a little bit big for an actual kind of art studio. And so Harmonize is kind of something we use, even though it's an in-person class, to kind of create more sort of interaction and conversation between the students and allow them to kind of share various kinds of media for the different projects they make.
I think it's interesting. I have a 16-year-old son right now, junior in high school, and everything in the high school level, whether
well, not whether, most high schools are in person, but it's everything he does is now through some form of educational technology, right? Both of you use Canvas. He uses Canvas. He thinks it's really cool that his dad works with Canvas. Anyway, hey, you take what you can with a 16-year-old, right? But it's interesting because we're hearing more and more that instructors are not just using ed tech in Harmonize, but in general, just ed tech for online classes, are using it more and more for in-person classes or hybrid classes because it gives that level of comfortability that the students already have with using tech in everyday life.
Yeah,
All right.
every class that we offer here at the college, whether it's online or in person, has a Canvas course attached to it. Some of them use it just limited, where we're using it as a grade book, but some of them are teaching their entire class through it, using those times when they're in the classroom to foster that connection, but then they can complete some of the other assignments through the technology. So we're in a different realm than we were pre-COVID. We had to now figure out how we can leverage that technology to enhance it. In fact, I even know some in-person classes that do all of their discussions online because they found that it's a way that you can give a voice to those kids that are a little too scared to speak up.
Very interesting. Well, let's go ahead and dive into some of the concepts that you guys are delivering, the design of these courses or assignments. So Holly, why don't you talk a little bit about one of the assignments that you've done within graphic design for your students?
Are you going to show while I'm talking?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just kind of explain how I structure the classes. I came to graphic design from the art field. So knowing that studio practice is very important, we need to get that hands-on learning. But then as part of it, we need to close the loop with that feedback. So while I was in classes or teaching art classes on campus, it's always that model of let's now critique. And we would spend hours in that critique classroom where everybody would put their work up on the wall and we'd go back and forth and add comments. I felt very strongly about still following that model, even though it's an online class, but those discussions, those critiques were a little harder to do. So how can I get that model to happen? I could do peer review, which I bring that as a part of it too, but then trying to create forums where all the students can get in there. So from the beginning of this program, I've built that into it, where weekly we create an assignment based on some requirements that I add in. And then the following week, the students share their work with everybody else. And we talk back and forth about the successes, the chances for improvement, answer questions. The example that David's sharing on the screen is a first-year class. So these students have been in the software for 4 weeks. And so really we're learning the tools. So it might be, okay, I've learned this tool, but this didn't work out. How can you help each other? And so I really wanted to make sure that the students had that sense of community. And since it's asynchronous, I didn't really have that. They're not logging in. We're not talking with each other. So how can I simulate that? And so discussion boards were my solution. Something that I've always really struggled with a traditional discussion board in Canvas is a student would post their work. The format was always either huge or teeny. The file formatting was always different with the students, and I tried my best to say this many pixels, the size. And then it would be the endless scrolling and scrolling and scrolling to get down to the last student. And so like David was saying, I have a sophomore and I'm looking over his shoulder and he's showing me Flipgrid. And I said, wait a minute, show me Flipgrid. And what I liked is it had that grid system. So in one shot, you could see all of the students, their videos. But I thought, boy, it would be great if I had something similar. Instead of that scrolling, I can get that overview of the assignments and then we can drill into the discussion. So when Harmonize came across my plate, it came under our instructional designer, and she always likes to test things and pilot it with those of us that are willing to implement it. And of course, I said, yes, let me have a shot at it. And that's been a benefit, I hope, for myself and my students, is now we're sort of simulating that critique board where we're putting it all on the wall, you're looking at in one snapshot, and then we can drill into them a little bit more. I haven't had a chance to play around with bringing video into it yet, because I still feel like there's different ways that we're going to talk about art when we're talking about it out loud versus trying to type it out. But it's a good step forward for modeling that critique system.
Can you talk a little bit about, in this type of assignment, you said you're really trying to get that dialogue going back and forth, that critique area. Talk about
maybe some fails and some successes that you've had with getting the engagement higher in those classes?
I haven't seen a lot of failures. I guess one is always that students are scared to share their work. They are concerned that everybody else is going to critique them and critique them harshly. And it can be very vulnerable. And this is whether you're in a face-to-face or an online class. The minute you share your work out, it's available for that response. Well, anybody in the visual arts, programming, graphic design, that's a part of it, is we're producing work that's meant for the public or for an audience. And we need to combat some of those failings. So we try to make these a very protected area, especially for the first year, that they know that, yeah, it's going to be vulnerable. Everybody else is going to see your work. Don't post on the last day as a way to kind of hide in the background, because sometimes you'll find that too. I'm going to save it right away till the deadline so nobody can see it. So even just kind of priming the class to say, look, it's vulnerable, it's hard, it's a little scary. We're all in it together. This is what a good critique looks like. We give them, you know, some applause. We ask them a question. We give them feedback. It's meant to be encouraging. And knowing that we're all learning along the way, but also having those conversations with students about your work is not you. These critiques are not a criticism on who you are as a person, but simply the work. And it's a learning opportunity that we can detach ourselves from it and say, how can it get better? So just laying some of the groundwork for that is a good foundation to start with, but that kind of comes with practice as you get students that are super scared to talk. How do you make them more comfortable? But then what I found is a lot of success with interaction between the students simply because they enjoy hearing from each other and they enjoy seeing each other's work. I tell my students all the time is when they submit an assignment, it's like Christmas morning for me because I get to open all these presents. And a lot of times it's stuff I asked for, and sometimes it's something I didn't ask for. And I think, how did this get on my Christmas list? But students, I think, follow that same thing too. They get excited to see how their fellow classmates solve it. A lot of my assignments have very specific requirements. You have to have this object, this style, this technique, but then after that, it's open-ended. So by honing in those requirements, we can allow for flexibility and creativity within that. And so they're excited to see what else did somebody come up with. So they really just naturally want to talk back and forth with each other. They recognize that there are times that they didn't do something right. So they want to learn from somebody else and say, wait a minute, that was super cool. How did you do it so I can benefit? Sometimes discussions can feel like it's something I have to do to earn points in a class. Here's a question, I'm going to answer at bare minimum, and I'm not really going to engage with others. It's just something that we have to check out off. So finding that buy-in for students is really important. And I think just because we're producing things that are visual, we get a little bit more buy-in in the arts. So it's always really exciting to see that.
Yeah, it's that social media high, right? Whenever people post, they look for those comments, they look for those reactions. I also think that I really like that in your examples, you gave questions for them to answer as a part of it, and I think that is almost like an icebreaker. Like, here's some questions to go ahead and start thinking about as you're responding and dialoguing with each other as students. It gets you going, it gets you started where some people might feel like they don't even know where to start to critique someone. But since you gave them those questions, it gives them that little bit of a insight to go into the first response, if you will.
And usually they're just very basic. Tell us your
Yeah.
ideas behind this. Start a little slower. Sometimes we need that context because we see a design and go, what am I looking at? And so if the student can explain their process, their thoughts, what their inspiration was, we can then tie it back to it and have a little bit more clarity. So that information can help us form that critique. And then a lot of it is modeling. The first time we do it, I go through and I add comments on what they're looking for, and they can kind of follow suit with some of that. I really encourage them to ask each other questions too, so they can go back and respond to each other. And if they're not clarifying, I kind of act as the moderator then. So I'm just facilitating those questions. If I don't feel like they were thorough enough, I can say, okay, great, you picked up on this. Now tell me a little bit more. Because what anybody in the arts can kind of share this too. we speak a visual language and we have to translate it into a verbal language. And that can be difficult. I can see something and I know it works, but to express that in a verbal language can be difficult. So just helping them learn how to translate that is really important. So that's, again, part of that critique element, is just translating and learning how to speak the language.
Well, speaking of translating from a visual language to a verbal language, I think that kind of goes nicely into Brian and what he's doing, which is trying to take a programming language and turn that into a visual language. So Brian, tell us a little bit about your program, it's specifically the SNAP program that you guys are doing there at Michigan.
Yeah, sure. So the intro classes that I teach are taught in this language called Snap. It's a programming language that's developed mainly at UC Berkeley. It's all hosted entirely online, and so it runs in your browser, right? So students don't have to download any software. They don't have to deal with any system requirements, anything like that. And then the real benefit of Snap, though, is that it's a visual language. It's block-based, and so you drag and drop the kind of different components of the code. Essentially, you can't make syntax errors. You can't make the kind of errors you make in other programming languages where you forget to put a semicolon at the end of a line and the entire program crashes, right? You can never do anything like that. You can still make all kinds of mistakes, but the mistakes are always going to be on some level in the logic of the code that you wrote. And so that's kind of the benefit of Snap. It's used in another similar language called Scratch, which maybe some people are more familiar with, but it's very similar. Snap is more powerful, but they're similar languages. They're sometimes used to teach programming to students in, as low as, like elementary school or middle school, high school. But it's actually it's quite advanced. You can do kind of advanced computer science stuff in it too. And so it really kind of works well at all levels. I get a lot of students who have never programmed before, but I also get computer science majors who are looking for creative expression credit, and they have a lot of, find a lot of interesting things to do in the language too. And the other thing I guess I'll mention about Snap is that it's kind of natively designed for doing, it's really great for doing kind of media work, because it has this stage, which you can kind of see in the screen capture in the example that David's got there. It's got this stage where you can have animations, you can do static drawings, you can write text to it also. It's kind of inherently set up to work with sprites that can be animated and move around the screen, along with all of the kind of classic programming stuff, working with, data, doing math and that sort of thing. So it's a very flexible language. It's great for beginners, and it's really easy to start jumping into doing kind of interesting visual projects. What I tend to do is just provide students with a lot of starter code, right? So they'll have a lot of stuff to work with. They can click around, try things out, see what happens as they run the code. And the idea is that they kind of play with that and build something out of it, rather than kind of working from first principles and having to sort of start from a blank page. So that's another way that we kind of, bootstrap people into programming who have never done it before, is that we don't start with the kind of the math behind it, all the kind of harder conceptual stuff. We just get them kind of playing around very quickly, and then kind of sort of like sneak the concepts in and a little bit of kind of computer science terminology and that sort of thing, sort of as we go, as they start to get a feel for what is actually happening, then we kind of attach ideas to that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you sent me this screenshot here, and I mean, I can just think of myself when I was a little kid. I remember thinking, oh, here I can create this video game if I was going to create it myself. And I mean, that's literally what some of your students are doing, right? They're taking a scrap piece of paper, they're designing a game, or they're designing something there, and then taking it from the page into the program and having it run, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the main thing that I use Harmonize for, is this kind of initial kind of sketching stage. Sometimes students are posting work that's a little bit more in progress, but sometimes it is just a sketch on a piece of paper. So a lot of them like to sketch on iPads now, so they'll have really nice kind of relatively polished sketches. But yeah, they'll post these ideas. One of the kind of projects that we build to in the semester is a video game, and so they often get really into that because they have all these ideas from games they've played before. They're sketching stuff out. They're incorporating aspects from, Mario games and like all kinds of other stuff. A bunch of games now that are like mobile games that I've never heard of, but they're getting inspiration from that. And so they'll make an initial post of their sketch. And then people will comment on it. And usually the assignment will be to, make a post with your sketch and then comment on at least a couple of other people's work. And I mean, it really works especially great with the games because they tend to have all kinds of ideas and inspiration, and they suggest all kinds of kind of fun stuff to do.
So, would you mind showing us a little bit more? I took a screenshot there, but I'm going to stop sharing here and let you kind of take the wheel, because I think just for maybe a lot of people out there understanding this program a little better of what you actually have the students go through.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And yeah, and one of the things that I'm really excited about going forward is the thing that David was showing on the screen there, where there was an actual screen capture from Snap, because that's something we haven't really been able to do before, but I do like to get video recordings of some of the projects, like the video games, partly so I can see them play it because sometimes they're too hard for me to actually win the game. And so I need to see them do it basically to make sure that they did all, fulfilled all the requirements. So I'm excited about that screen capture ability. What I've got open here is another Snap project. This is for an earlier unit where we do image filters. You can see a photo of my dog over here that's been kind of heavily blurred by one of the scripts. And you can kind of see it's all you drag around, you have this big, huge workspace, all of these little scripts, you just click on code to run it. For this photo editing project, we have all of these images that we've just given them as kind of starting points. And you can take something like this script here, which is going to take a picture of a horse. For every pixel, it's going to subtract all of the color channels from 255, which is just going to invert them. It's going to take it, basically make the photo look like a negative, right? So you get something like this. And then there are things like this where you can use the X and Y values of the pixel, right? So you can manipulate the colors based on where they are in the picture, right? So you get this kind of half and half thing. One of these down here is going to do like a green screen effect, a chroma key, where if the green value is very large for a pixel, it's going to replace it with another image. This one takes a minute to run. It's still going right now. Right, there it is. So right where the original picture was this Alice, and we put the waterfall behind her. So yeah, so there's an example. I'll just really quickly pull up the video game one too, because that one I think is kind of fun. And the nice thing about these two is that they can all be saved to the cloud under your account. You can share the code, or you can just run them. You can embed them in websites. This is my game. This is the sample game here. We've got a Pikachu that can jump on a platform. We've got a Charmander that can run around. He can hide behind the grass. He can't be caught when he's back there. We've got a score on the screen. That's one of the things that the students have to have in their game. So yeah, a lot of really fun stuff you can do. It's easy to kind of jump in and start playing around for students to kind of manipulate the code. What I'll usually have them do is just export. Everything in Snap, you can kind of just right click and then save a picture of whatever you're doing. So for their drawing projects, they'll save that. That's what they would post to Harmonize. For the games, like I said, I'm really excited about having the screen capture feature so that I can actually have that kind of directly in the interface, because I get a lot of videos that have been recorded on someone's cell phone pointing at the computer screen as a recording. It works. It usually serves the purpose, and I totally take it, but it'll be great to be able to have them just do it directly like that.
Absolutely. Now, Brian, you mentioned this is hosted through UC Berkeley. Is that correct?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
Is this a program that if no matter what school you're a part of, could you get a part of this if you wanted to try to do this in one of your classes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's totally free and open. Yeah, we don't have any special partnership with them or anything. We just make our own accounts on there. We have the students make accounts. You don't even really need an account. Students wouldn't even have to sign up for anything. You can save projects to your computer locally and then open them up again. Having an account just lets you, save things to the cloud as well. But it's it's a totally kind of open educational resource. So it's out there for anybody. Even almost all of the starter code that I give students in my class is all public under my profile. So there's a whole kind of gallery of stuff that people have posted. The developers of Snap also post a lot of really cool demos. They come up with a lot of really amazing stuff that you can use as a starting point too.
Awesome. I can just see a lot of instructors taking something like this, graphic design or programming, and incorporating that in to have some fun with their students. Even if it's just one side project, I could see that being really fun. So you were talking about the screen share and how you want to be able to see them go through there, maybe even give them some critique back. Holly, you're already kind of doing that, but with the images and the graphic design. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about how you're accomplishing that right now in your classes?
Yeah, similar to Brian, once I get my students in the second year of the program, we then talk about the design process and that we're not just jumping right into the software and designing something. So in that first example, that was it. Here are the requirements, play with the tools, come up with something. Second year has to slow it down and realize that it is a design process, that we're developing things over time. And so they are required to complete 4 or 5 different stages of a design. So we start with a client design brief, we call it. So pretend like we've interviewed a client, they've told us what they need. The students are required to submit sketches in the first week. So just like Brian, they're doing it on paper because things are easily changed on paper before we get into the software. Currently, I have them submit that just through an assignment page, and then I respond back to them. I feel like just the individual feedback between me and that student with the sketches is beneficial, that I can find any areas that I can help steer them towards. So they might have 10 thumbnail sketches and we want to narrow it down to 3. The following week, I then have them come up with drafts. So that model of a critique where we're looking at the work after it's been completed is okay because it's a place to start to get them to learn how to talk. But really that step comes in, it's more beneficial when we do it before the final piece is completed. Oftentimes when a student is creating work for a client, they're going to come up with a couple drafts that are well developed. They're going to share it with the client and test the waters to see if they're on the right track. So I now move up the critique further in along with the process. So the students, after they've come up with those drafts, they chat back and forth and help each other refine them. So they might share 3 examples and say which one is most successful. I always struggle to know how to give feedback to students, and I kind of bounce around. Sometimes it'll just, again, be that text-based response. I will say that after a while of texting or typing all of this, I get very sick of it. So I now look at different models of what can I do to make it a more natural process, a little bit easier on me, because after a time, if I'm typing all of this feedback to students, it can be a long process. I've tried using Canvas Studio before. So within our Canvas instance, if you don't use that as your LMS, it's a screen capture software that we have right embedded into the LMS. So then I can take that screen capture, I can circle areas to say this is successful, move this down an inch. It can be hard to say, okay, in the upper left corner, 2 inches from the left border, you're going to take that, you're going to move it down 3 centimeters, so forth. So I feel like it's better if I can draw or actually move some of those elements and have them watch. So I would try the screen capture through Studio. The problem with that is it doesn't embed directly into the Canvas gradebook. So what I have to do is go out, record it, save it, create a public link, paste it in SpeedGrader, and cross my fingers that students watch it, knowing that students are only going to watch it if it's the size of a TikTok video, right?
Right.
So something else that I've tried in the past, and I try this with my students, is annotations. So within Canvas, again, in the gradebook, you can do annotations. A lot of times you'll see instructors who are in communications, they'll do this on the paper, on a student's submission paper. So they'll highlight something and say, this is passive tense. They'll say, check your grammar. Well, I decided, can I use that as a graphic designer? So I would start doing things where I'm drawing boxes around areas and putting little notes, circling things, moving things. That was fairly successful in SpeedGrader. So sometimes I'll kind of switch back and forth depending on my feeling and depending how much feedback the students need. But then with a meeting with David, he's like, we have annotation. So I thought, okay, let's give it a shot and Harmonize and see if I can get any students to do it. So I attempted it. You can see the example on the screen of a student submitted a draft. So again, we're looking at what are those specifics? How can I help them sharpen it into something that I would eventually share with a client? So I would find some of these areas that I would draw a box around it and then put a little kind of like a map point. and then give them feedback there. So now instead of saying, okay, in the third line of your heading, look at that word and I want you to swap it and move stuff around. I have not seen any students look at that and say, oh, I can do that too myself, but I'm thinking of how can we integrate that in and make that a process for the students. I've had them sample it a little bit in the Canvas annotation with some luck, but it hasn't been a required thing. What I'm always looking for is how can I get these tools to be a natural thing for my students to do? I don't want them to feel like, well, I have to annotate it. So knowing that the screen capture is coming available in Harmonize, I haven't had a chance to try that yet, but there's the hope there too that if the students don't want to type over and over again like I do, maybe it'll become a natural process for them to upload a video critiquing it. I just haven't figured out a way to implement that yet, but knowing that we have the tools, it's something we can try.
Yeah, I think maybe we had talked about this as well. I have seen actually a prior presenter on our webinar series, Kelly Marcus, who talked about her use in her communications courses. They're using a lot of polling, and so she has them go in and say to the students, here's 3 examples, which one do you like best, and then they can give their feedback that way as well, which is just not quite the same as annotations, but it's a way to get that feedback, that critique, and put things out there to get the feedback from the other students. And I guess technically the instructors could also click the poll as well, right? So,
and sometimes the students are scared. They know the tools are there, but I don't want to be seen on a screen. I am a little leery that, or maybe they don't feel confident of giving each other feedback to the point of using those annotations. It's trying to help them see that there are tools that are available and if they're going to be more useful to you. So now I go back and say, okay, can I make it require that they have to do the first one as a video and then it's not so scary? It's that constant battle of how can I get them to naturally use like a polling if they poll each other. Which one do you like? Which draft should I go with? We have to enable them and make sure that they're comfortable going that far.
Yeah. Is there anything with, they're doing, is this a project? Would it be a semester-long project, or is this like a standalone project that's in the middle of the semester?
The example on the screen, we repeat this. So once we get into the second year, in my previous model, we do a smaller assignment each week and we critique them each week. Now I expand it a little bit. So now we're doing 4 or 5 bigger projects throughout the semester. So we slow it down. I try to have them do multiple assignments at the same time because that models what they're going to experience in graphic design, that I never just have one project and I'm fully committed to that one, that they need to be able to balance everything. So there are 3 or 4 week-long projects going on.
Okay. Have you ever now I'm just being curious on my side, have you tried using multiple weeks within one assignment, like taking it from stage 1 to the end? I know you said in the beginning you want that private comments, but have you experimented with doing the milestones where week 1 is due and then week 2 is due, anything like that?
Within Harmonize?
Yeah.
Not in this model. We've done it a little bit with one of the other examples I have where we have multiple due dates. No, I've wondered whether I want them critiquing. Sorry, everyone, there's my warning.
Do you need to go? Do you need to take shelter?
I might keep my eye on that.
Okay.
I haven't integrated it for it's a whole long week or week-long critique from start to finish with assignments yet, because I don't know if they're ready to get in with those sketches or not. I feel like I want to make sure that I'm leading them on the right path before they get so far in, because I think for those of us in the visual arts, we know that experience of you've been working on a project for so long and you're just grinding and grinding and trying to make it work and it doesn't come to fruition. If I can be that voice to help them cut off any of that at the beginning. We do keep those just the critiques open for a couple weeks so they can kind of go back and test the waters. If they want to upload another draft, get more feedback, that does become more natural, but I want to make sure that it's at a good time where they're ready to share it and get good feedback from each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So Brian, you're also doing something very similar within a collage and using color schemes as well, where they're going step by step. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, this example is related to the it's related to the Snap project that I showed you with the kind of image filters, right? Where the idea for the project is that they there are kind of two components. One of them is that they develop the actual filters themselves to do whatever processing they want on the images. The other part is that they then put them together into some kind of collage, which they generally don't do in Snap. Some of them do, but it's a little bit harder, especially for the point in the semester we're at, for them to do that. So I usually have them just take it into another program of their choice, often just you know, a slideshow program to arrange the photos. And so this is an example where a student is sketching out the kind of layout and the kind of overall color scheme for their project, right? But not the actual specific images themselves. So it's kind of split up into different kind of different stages. And I really like this one because they really are thinking about like the color scheme and the arrangement ahead of time. I mean, not all of them always do that. Some of them will kind of, you know, kind of just arrange the photos in a grid or something. But yeah, so that's kind of there's not a whole lot of kind of scaffolding for that assignment. It's relatively small, but this idea of having the separate layout from the actual image processing is something that I found kind of useful.
So, as far as building upon your program, like, could you speak a little bit about how this fits in? You said it does tie in, but can you speak more of how it does tie into the other components in the course that you're teaching?
Do you mean in terms of the sort of like the progression of the semester, or just kind of within this project?
Within the progression of the semester, but I guess how does this assignment with the collage help them with, you know, doing SNAP programs and other things that you're teaching?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, we kind of work through the units to some extent in order of what's kind of easiest to introduce in Snap. And so we start with a unit that's on basically like making abstract drawings, mostly kind of with shapes and lines in Snap, where you're taking essentially a sort of little cursor, like you can think of it as kind of like a little mouse, except you're moving it with the code instead of with your hand. And you know, draw shapes, you can do repeated patterns. You can even, some students will make like tessellations, really kind of cool, more advanced sort of drawings. And so that's kind of the starting point. It's sort of the simplest thing to do. From there, that's when we move on to doing image filters, which are in a way more conceptually accessible and that students can understand, like an image, a filter. I use Instagram, I use Snapchat, like this all, you know, it totally makes sense to them, like what they're doing. But it's conceptually a little harder because you have to understand how an image is made of pixels and that we're actually manipulating the red, green, and blue values of those pixels to get these different effects. And there are various things, like if you want to make an image grayscale, you need the red, green, and blue to all be the same. Whereas if you want to have color in the image, those numbers are going to be different. And so you can average the color channels together for every pixel to get grayscale. So it gets to be where there's a little bit more in terms of kind of algorithms, these kind of specific processes they need to understand. But in the context of creating these image filters, you know, making a photo sepia, making it black and white, inverting the colors to make it negative, blurring pixels together and that sort of thing. But from there we kind of move, so from there we move to sound, which is a whole other kind of thing, right? A sound is a list of numbers that represent the kind of amplitude of a waveform over time, right? So it's a little bit more abstract. I have them build these kind of soundscapes, right? So often it'll be like the sounds of walking down the street in a city. You'll have some traffic noise, you'll have people talking. You might be kind of looping some of the sounds in the background where other ones only play once. You know, you want to adjust the volume level, that kind of amplitude of the sounds and that sort of thing. And eventually we work our way towards interactive programs where they can use the webcam. There are a lot of great features built into Snap for doing that. You can move your head around and get the cursor to move to draw stuff. You can control a lot of other aspects with like the volume level from the microphone and things like that. So we sort of bring together some of the previous ideas about using sound, about drawing on the screen, but start incorporating kind of interactivity. and doing things that are more complex. And then that kind of gets us to the point where we can actually make the video games, right? Where they understand having multiple objects on the screen moving around. They understand how to capture the keyboard inputs from the user. They also understand how to manipulate images to create the kind of sprites and the characters they want. And so all those kind of components basically come together for the video games.
Brian, one of the things that you had mentioned to me when we first spoke was how this program and having essentially, students who may be, art students in the liberal arts college, but to get this background in programming, can you speak a little bit about how that really does help with their translation from being a student at a university to going out into the quote unquote real world and getting a job and what that provides for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's our goal is for students to be able to be what we call conversational programmers. So being able to kind of talk about programming, talk about the process of developing code, developing a piece of software, which doesn't necessarily require you to understand all of the little kind of finicky technical details of working in different languages, installing all of the stuff, dealing with software dependencies, all of this just kind of stuff that you have to do if you're a software developer. What we want them to understand is just the kind of bigger picture conceptual process that's involved in developing software, which has to do more with just breaking a task down into smaller components, right? Understanding sort of just what the computer can do on a basic level so you understand how a problem is going to break down. And we're particularly kind of thinking about roles that are, maybe in the tech industry or adjacent to it around things like product management and things like that, where someone is not going to be writing code on a daily basis, but they are going to be working with people who do. And the more they can kind of understand about what those people are doing, the kind of better prepared they're going to be.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Being someone who is not a programmer working for a company that does programming, it is a very hard line to sometimes get through that language barrier almost between the programmers that are all geniuses and the guy over here running webinars that says make it pretty and blue and, and try to get them to understand what I'm talking about. Speaking with the transition of going from student into the workforce and using these skills, but beyond those skills, Holly, the other assignment that you had that you shared with me was kind of a reading assignment because we're still in school, right? It's not all projects, it's not all design. Tell us a little bit about this assignment that you used to try to help get your students ready for that transition.
Yeah, so this assignment is from one of our seminar courses. The students take 2 seminar courses in their last year to do just that, prepare them to enter the work field or the workforce, knowing that great graphic design skills is only going to get you so far. You have to learn how to work with professionals in the field. We use a book called Burn Your Portfolio, which when you're a graphic designer and artist, your whole goal in art is to come out with a portfolio and say, look at how great I am, look at what I've developed. And this author is kind of challenging it and saying, yeah, but there's so much else to it. So I've taken the book and there are 79 chapters. Each one is 2 pages. They're short little chapters, easy to digest, but very important. And so over 10 weeks, we discuss each of these. And I found that, I had specific questions based on some of the chapters that I wanted to get into. Something that we used to have under our previous LMS was the ability to organize your discussions into multiple sections. So it's not just a threaded discussion where in the past what I would do is I'd post my question and ask students to respond to it just as a threaded discussion, scroll all the way down to get to question 2 and question 3. So I'd already kind of had that model and thought, can I go back to something like we had previously, where I could almost create a separate page for each of those questions? What I was able to try this past year was within Harmonize doing different posts. So I thought, since the students can start a post that has an image at the top with each of their work, and then we can drill down into their specific design, can I do that to organize my threaded discussions as well. So the images that you're seeing are just ones that I took. They're the headings from the chapters. So it's got that visual clue of, oh yeah, we're in chapter 3. So then I would put my question and the students could chat back and forth based on that question without getting distracted by some of the other questions or other chapters. And so this would be open for a week. They'd read all their chapters. They'd chat back and forth between all of them. So we could have multiple discussions going on at the same time, but it was all organized within one assignment page. The other thing I tried with this one was, since this is a seminar course and students know what's expected at this point, they know what I'm looking for, I wanted to take some of that pressure off to say, you know, you're posting 3 times, you're using this many words, your grammar is correct, you're fully engaged. All of those are expectations at this point. I simply want you to complete it with that expectations and then try the auto grading. So I set this one up to do just that. I wanted them to hit different milestones with different due dates. A lot of times with asynchronous discussions, you're going to see something like post your first post by Wednesday or Thursday. Then you have 3 comments to your classmates due by Sunday. And so I set it up in such a way that it was required that here's your first due date. If you do your initial post to each of the questions, you'll earn your first 5 or 50 points. And then the rest of the week, now you're going to devote that time to hitting all of your comments. So there's a certain amount of comments that you have to submit to each of your classmates. Again, if you do that, you'll get the automatic points. And now it's just going to kind of auto grade. I was sharing with David that I tested it out. There are a couple options that you can choose, and you have to kind of know what you're looking for with the students. If you call it a post, that's exactly what I did. So my initial ones were denoted as posts. Well, the students aren't doing that. So if I tell them that they're going to earn 10 points for their first post, it's not going to auto grade it. So I had to clearly figure it out in my mind of what was the difference between a comment and a post. So it would total it up. There's always that chance that something didn't work right. The students still completed their work in a successful way. So then I would just go back and give them the full points. But I set it up almost as a pass-fail. I don't want that nitty-gritty detail stuff. You know the expectations. I just want you to be active participants. So this allowed me to kind of take the pressure off and say, you're going to get the points. It's just going to auto-grade, keep chatting, and focus more on the learning and the comments instead of, you know, the word count.
Yeah. That's awesome. Any final thoughts, Holly or Brian? Here, I'll throw this out. We'll see if we can end with this. If a brand new instructor came to you and said, I'm getting ready to start this new class and I'm going to be teaching something around digital arts, what would be that one piece of advice you would want to give them? Kind of put you on the spot.
Because I teach online, I have to remind the instructors that if you're teaching fully online, you have to be present in that class, and your students do too. That, you know, we have those 5 stages of the design process. Feedback is one of those. And if you don't have that, you're not fully exploring and developing the work as best you can. Students need to have that feedback as part of their process because they're going to get it from clients. So if we can make a safe environment that they can get it in multiple ways, can we try peer reviews, group discussions, individual discussions? The tools will come, and there are different tools that we can use, but ultimately having that aspect is very important. I had one example where I decided to do a little webinar with a couple students. They were asking specific questions. I said, let's all get together and chat. Now, these 2 had known each other for 2 years, but never spoken to each other in person. And I set up the meeting for half hour. We ended up going for an hour and a half because they were so excited to see each other in person. They really got to know each other and their designs and who they were as people just by interacting with this. And so it was kind of fun to see them connect, but knowing that that's why we do it. The students are connecting.
Awesome. Brian, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have in a way kind of a similar answer, I guess, but coming from a different type of class, I guess, because I'm teaching programming classes, but like we design our classes in general, but you know, whether it's an arts-based class or something more in the humanities, the classes are designed, especially at the intro level, to be relatively easy to get a good grade in, because we're trying to be like maximally welcoming, I guess, to students who might not have thought they would ever be able to do programming, right? That's like really, really important to us. But it's very important to me, I guess, to be able to have a class that, isn't hard to get a good grade in, but not because there isn't a level of close engagement with the work that they're doing, or a level of kind of serious feedback on the work. And so that for me also is, I grade things really closely, not necessarily to taking off points, but providing a lot of comments. I try to really kind of highlight things that I thought were good, or point out new ideas and things like that, to kind of model the idea that this is like, someone is really looking at this closely. I'm really paying attention to what you're doing, and I want to see you do interesting things. And I'm excited when I see you do things that are kind of pushing yourself. So even if it wouldn't be hard to kind of get the full credit for the assignment, or at least to get, an A on the assignment, that there's still like something kind of serious going on here. And I try to take the kind of the art side of it seriously. It's almost an easier class because it's a programming class, and not because it's an art class, I guess, from my perspective. Because I don't, it's not that it's like easy because you're getting your creative expression requirement or something like that. So that just close level of engagement is what I really kind of enjoy about the class, and what I really try to always kind of show.
Well, thank you both so much, Holly and Brian. I've learned so much from both of you. Being a non-professor, I love these series because I get to learn so much. I feel like at the end of this, I'm probably going to be like experienced enough to teach a class, but not nobody would hire me. But it's fun to learn all of this, and thank you for sharing this. So that other people can learn, and we'll have this up on our website as well. So if you ever need to go back and watch it to refresh your memory, we'll have it up there to share. I never saw any questions come through, I don't think. Let me just make sure I didn't. So if anything does come up, you can email me or reach out to us. We'd be glad to take questions about these designs. Otherwise, thank you so much, Holly and Brian. Really, really appreciate this. I'm really excited about this one. I think this is going to look good on the website, along with our English and communications, digital arts. I really think this is one. If I was a student, I would be wanting to take one of your classes. That's where I'm coming from. So thank you so much, and we really appreciate it. Everyone else, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Oh, wait just a second. I did not mention this. We do have 2 new webinars coming up. We have coming up on May the 7th. Teaching history online. So that'll be our next webinar series. We have Betty Jo Harris and Stephanie Sellers who are going to be presenting on that. And then on June the 11th, we have teaching foreign languages online. I missed that one. I don't even see it right now. Make sure I got that up there. Here we go. Teaching foreign languages online. Right. That'll be on June the 11th. That's with Bethany Thompson and Nancy Perez. And we'll be presenting on that. So if you're interested in learning more about teaching online, not just with Harmonize, but just in general, you can see from this webinar, we really talk about broad concepts here. You can sign up that for those webinars on our website. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I think we had a really good back and forth there on a couple of key. I try to, as you guys are talking, I try to find something I can kind of like transition into the next subject, and you guys it seems like everyone always gives me that little piece I can go, oh, okay, that's perfect, I can go right there and slide.
It was natural. I could see it spin it. It was timed very well. Great job facilitating.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Be safe, Holly.
Yeah, we got sirens going again, so I'm gonna head to the tornado shelter. I am technically a tornado shelter in my office. Otherwise, I
Okay.
would have tucked out. I'm interior, so
Okay, good.
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks,
Brian.
David. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.